You have spent so much of your life being the strong one that you almost forgot what it feels like to simply rest. Somewhere along the way, strength stopped becoming a choice and started becoming your identity. People learned they could rely on you, lean on you, call you during crises, bring you problems, expect you to hold everything together emotionally, even during seasons where you were quietly falling apart yourself. And because you carried it so well externally, very few people realized how heavy it truly became internally. You became the calm voice during chaos, the dependable one, the problem solver, the person who kept showing up even while exhausted. And over time, you trained yourself to suppress your own pain because there never seemed to be space for you to break down to. So you kept going, even when your spirit was tired, even when your body was tired, even when your heart quietly begged for rest. And one of the hardest parts about being emotionally strong is that people often become so accustomed to your resilience that they stop checking whether you are okay. They admire your endurance while overlooking the cost of it. They see how much you carry, but not always how much carrying has slowly drained you. That kind of exhaustion runs deeper than physical tiredness. It becomes emotional fatigue, spiritual fatigue, the kind of heaviness where even simple responsibilities start feeling overwhelming because your nervous system has been in survival mode for too long. You became so used to preparing for the next problem that peace itself started feeling unfamiliar. Your mind learned how to stay alert constantly, hyper-aware, hyper-responsible, always anticipating what might go wrong next. And eventually, carrying everything became automatic. You learned how to survive without fully realizing how little softness existed in your life anymore. There are moments lately where your soul feels tired in ways sleep cannot fix. Because the exhaustion is not just from work or responsibilities. It is from years of emotional armor, years of protecting yourself, years of trying to hold together situations, relationships, and people that were never fully yours to save alone. And if this resonates with you, Heaven wants you to hear something clearly right now. You were never meant to carry every battle by yourself. Somewhere along the way, you confused constant struggle with purpose. You believed being needed was the same thing as being loved. You believed exhaustion was proof of your value. But your spirit was not designed to live permanently in survival mode. Strength is beautiful. Resilience is beautiful. But so is rest. So is softness. So is allowing yourself to stop fighting for one moment and simply breathe again. And maybe that is why this season feels different lately. Because your soul is beginning to realize it cannot continue living beneath the weight of endless emotional warfare forever. The battle that shaped you is no longer meant to define you. And slowly, heaven is teaching your spirit that peace is not something you have to earn through suffering first. Lately, something has been changing inside you quietly. Not all at once, not dramatically, but subtly enough that your spirit can feel it before your mind fully understands it. The chaos that once consumed your attention no longer pulls at you the same way. Certain arguments feel unnecessary now. Certain relationships no longer have the emotional control they once had over your peace. Situations that used to trigger panic inside you are beginning to lose their power slowly. And part of you feels confused by this shift because for so many years, struggle became familiar. You became used to carrying pressure constantly, used to solving problems immediately, used to preparing yourself emotionally for disappointment before good things even had the chance to arrive. Survival became such a normal rhythm that your nervous system almost forgot what safety felt like. But now something inside you is softening. You may notice yourself craving quieter spaces lately. More rest, more stillness, more genuine connection instead of emotional chaos. Your spirit is becoming less interested in fighting battles that no longer align with your peace. That is not weakness. That is healing beginning to unfold. Because one of the first signs that a difficult spiritual season is ending is emotional detachment from constant warfare. You stop feeling the need to defend yourself endlessly. You stop chasing closure from people committed to misunderstanding you. You You stop exhausting yourself trying to force outcomes that were never fully under your control in the first place. And honestly, this shift can feel strange at first. Part of you may still expect another crisis to appear suddenly, another disappointment, another emotional burden demanding your attention. But heaven has been slowly teaching your spirit something new. You are no longer required to survive every moment through force. Some battles are ending because they have already taught you what they needed to teach you. Some doors are closing because your spirit has outgrown the exhaustion connected to them. Some cycles are finally breaking because you are no longer emotionally available for the version of life that kept you in constant fear. And even though your external circumstances may not have completely changed yet, internally your soul already senses the transition happening. You are becoming calmer, more selective with your energy, less reactive, less desperate to control everything. That emotional shift matters deeply, because peace usually enters quietly before life visibly changes around it. First, the spirit relaxes. Then the environment begins adjusting to match that new inner reality gradually. If this resonates with you, pay attention to how your body has been responding lately. You may feel emotionally tired not because something is wrong, but because your nervous system is finally realizing it no longer has to stay in permanent defense mode. And that realization can feel unfamiliar after years of struggle. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. It may simply mean that heaven is gently closing a chapter your spirit was never meant to stay trapped inside forever. One of the strangest parts of healing is that peace can initially feel uncomfortable. After living in survival mode for so long, your mind and body may not immediately know how to trust stillness. In fact, there are moments where rest itself creates anxiety inside you. And that confuses many people, because they think if the battle is finally ending, they should automatically feel relaxed. But when someone has spent years carrying emotional pressure, constantly anticipating problems, or staying hyper-aware of other people's moods and needs, the nervous system adapts to chaos as its normal state. So when silence finally arrives, part of you does not know what to do with it. You may notice this in small ways lately. The moment life becomes calmer, your mind immediately starts searching for what could go wrong next. You struggle to fully relax because some part of you still believes peace is temporary. Your body remains tense even during safe moments because survival taught you that danger often appeared without warning. That is not weakness. That is conditioning. Your spirit has been fighting for so long that resting now feels emotionally unfamiliar. You became accustomed to earning love through usefulness, earning safety through control, earning stability through overworking, overthinking, and overcarrying. And now heaven is asking you to loosen your grip. That can feel terrifying at first, because when a person has survived through hypervigilance for years, surrender can feel almost irresponsible. Part of you fears that if you stop preparing constantly, everything will collapse. That if you stop carrying everyone emotionally, people will leave. That if you stop controlling every possible outcome, life will become unsafe again. But exhaustion was never meant to become your permanent identity. You were not created to spend your entire existence emotionally armored. And honestly, many strong people secretly fear rest because rest forces them to finally feel everything they postponed during survival mode. When the distractions slow down, emotions rise. Grief rises. Loneliness rises. Fatigue rises. The body finally begins releasing what it was too busy surviving to process before. That is why healing can initially feel heavier before it feels lighter. Not because peace is harming you, but because your nervous system is learning how to exist without constant emergency signals for the first time in years. And this process requires gentleness. You do not have to force yourself into perfect peace overnight. Healing is not performance. Some days your body will still react as if danger is nearby, even when your spirit knows you are safe now. Some nights your mind will still replay fears automatically because those pathways were reinforced through years of stress. Be patient with yourself during this transition, because slowly, your spirit is relearning something sacred. You are allowed to exist without constantly proving your worth through suffering. You are allowed to rest without guilt. Allowed to breathe deeply without expecting punishment afterward. Allowed to experience calm without immediately preparing for loss. If this resonates with you, notice how often your exhaustion comes not from current problems, but from years of carrying emotional armor your body was never meant to wear continuously. And maybe heaven is not asking you to fight harder anymore. Maybe heaven is teaching you how to finally feel safe enough to put the armor down. Not because you became weak, but because the war inside your spirit is no longer meant to continue forever. For a long time, you believed it was your responsibility to hold everything together. If something was falling apart, you tried to fix it. If someone was hurting, you carried their pain. If relationships became unstable, you worked harder to keep them alive. You became so accustomed to managing emotional crises that eventually you started believing every burden was yours to solve personally. But some things were never yours to carry. And heaven has been trying to show you that lately. Not through punishment, not through abandonment, but through exhaustion. Because sometimes God allows a person to become tired enough that they finally release responsibilities they were never meant to control alone in the first place. You were trying to save situations that required divine intervention, not self-sacrifice. Trying to force healing in people who were unwilling to heal themselves. Trying to create stability in environments that only survived through chaos. And while your intentions came from love, your spirit slowly became depleted carrying battles that exceeded human strength. That is why this season feels different. You are being asked to surrender what your hands can no longer hold peacefully. And surrender is not failure. Many strong people misunderstand surrender because they associate it with giving up. But spiritually, surrender often means trusting God enough to stop interfering with processes you cannot control anyway. It means recognizing that your constant overfunctioning was not always helping the situation heal. Sometimes it was simply keeping you trapped inside cycles of exhaustion. There are relationships you could not fix alone, problems you could not solve alone, people you could not save through love alone. And that truth may hurt emotionally at first because your heart genuinely wanted to help. But your spirit was never designed to become a permanent emotional rescue system for everyone around you. God is now stepping into areas where your own strength reached its limit. That is why some things are finally shifting after years of resistance. Not because you suddenly found the perfect solution, but because heaven is removing the pressure that convinced you everything depended entirely on you. It never did. You may even notice life forcing you to let go recently. Situations closing unexpectedly. Emotional distance forming naturally. Certain struggles no longer responding to your effort the way they once did. At first this may have felt frightening, but spiritually it may actually be protection, because God cannot fully carry what you refuse to release. And some of your greatest healing will begin the moment you stop fighting battles heaven never assigned you personally. If this resonates with you, take a moment to ask yourself how much of your exhaustion came from trying to control outcomes that were always beyond your authority. How much energy you spent anticipating, fixing, rescuing, proving, explaining, and emotionally managing situations that drained your peace completely. Your spirit has carried enough. You do not have to force every answer anymore. You do not have to hold every relationship together alone anymore. You do not have to remain emotionally available for every crisis anymore. There comes a season where heaven gently removes the sword from your hands and says, "Rest now. I will handle what you cannot." And maybe that is the real reason your soul feels so tired lately. Not because you are failing, but because God is trying to teach you that your life was never meant to be built entirely around struggle. Some battles are ending not because you finally became stronger, but because heaven decided you have carried enough already. For so long, your body learned how to stay prepared for impact. Emotionally prepared, mentally prepared, spiritually prepared. You became used to bracing yourself before conversations, before disappointments, before unexpected problems. Even during calm moments, Part of you remained alert because survival taught you that peace could disappear at any moment. And over time, that constant alertness hardened you in ways you did not always notice immediately. Not cold-hearted, not cruel, just tired. Tired in the way people become when they have spent years carrying invisible emotional weight without enough softness to balance it. You learned how to survive, but not always how to receive care. You learned how to help others relax, while your own nervous system rarely felt fully safe enough to do the same. But heaven is guiding you toward something different now. Toward softness. Not weakness. Not passivity. Softness. The kind that allows your shoulders to relax again. The kind that no longer expects every interaction to become conflict. The kind that allows your heart to exist without permanent emotional armor around it. And honestly, this transition may feel vulnerable at first, because strong people often associate softness with danger. Somewhere inside, there is still a fear that if you stop guarding yourself constantly, life will hurt you again. That if you become too peaceful, something painful will catch you unprepared. But hypervigilance is not the same thing as safety. Constant tension does not prevent pain. It only prevents rest. And your spirit deserves rest now. You deserve mornings where your first feeling is not anxiety. Conversations that do not require emotional defense. Relationships where love feels gentle instead of exhausting. Moments where your nervous system is not constantly scanning for hidden threats or emotional instability. This is what healing slowly begins creating. Not perfection, but softness returning to places inside you that survival forced into tension for too long. You may even notice yourself craving simpler things lately. Quiet mornings, slow conversations, honest people, peaceful environments, emotional safety instead of emotional intensity. That shift is important because your soul is no longer addicted to chaos in the way it once was. You are beginning to understand that calmness is not boredom. It is health. And if this resonates with you, allow yourself to stop apologizing for needing gentleness now. There is nothing selfish about protecting your peace after years of carrying emotional storms. Nothing weak about wanting rest after surviving constant pressure. Your spirit is not asking for too much. It is asking for balance, for care, for stillness, for permission to finally unclench after years of survival. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this new season is learning how to receive instead of only giving. To let people support you without guilt. To let love arrive without immediately questioning it. To let your body relax without feeling undeserving of peace. Because healing is not only about becoming stronger. Sometimes healing is about becoming soft enough to feel safe inside your own life again. And heaven may be teaching you that your future will not be built through endless struggle anymore. It will be built through alignment, through peace, through relationships and environments where your nervous system no longer feels forced to survive every moment. For the first time in a long time, your soul is learning that safety is real. And slowly, your heart is beginning to believe it too. Imagine waking up one morning without immediately feeling pressure in your chest. No urgent emotional weight waiting for you before the day even begins. No constant need to prepare for conflict, defend yourself, or carry everyone else's emotions before your own. Just quiet, not empty silence, peaceful silence. The kind your soul has been searching for underneath all the exhaustion. That is the season heaven may be leading you into now. A slower rhythm, a gentler life, a version of yourself that no longer survives through constant tension. For so long, your days may have revolved around emotional emergencies, solving problems, managing people's reactions, anticipating disappointment, carrying invisible responsibilities nobody fully understood. Even moments that should have felt joyful were often overshadowed by stress living quietly in the background of your mind. But surrender changes the atmosphere of a person's life slowly. Not overnight, not perfectly, but steadily. Because when you finally stop trying to control everything, your spirit creates room for peace to enter naturally. You begin realizing that not every problem requires your immediate emotional involvement. Not every conflict deserves your energy. Not every burden belongs on your shoulders. And gradually, life begins feeling lighter. You may start noticing beauty in ordinary moments again. Morning sunlight through the window. Calm conversations without hidden tension. Eating slowly instead of rushing constantly. Sleeping deeply without carrying emotional warfare into your dreams. These moments sound simple, but for someone who lived in survival mode for years, they feel almost sacred. Because peace becomes deeply meaningful once you understand the cost of chaos. Your future may no longer look dramatic the way your past did. And honestly, that is part of the blessing. Less emotional volatility. Less unpredictability. Less constant rescuing. More stability. More alignment. More relationships built on mutual care instead of emotional exhaustion. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you will begin experiencing what it feels like to exist without constantly carrying armor around your heart. That is the reward of surrender. Not weakness. Freedom. Freedom from overcarrying. Freedom from hypervigilance. Freedom from believing your value depends entirely on how much suffering you can endure silently. If this resonates with you, allow yourself to stop romanticizing survival. Yes, your strength helped you endure difficult seasons. Yes, your resilience carried you through painful chapters. But your spirit does not need to remain trapped inside permanent warfare to prove its worth anymore. You survived. Now heaven is teaching you how to live. And living fully requires softness, rest, joy, presence, emotional safety. It requires allowing yourself to experience life without constantly expecting it to collapse underneath you. There may still be difficult moments ahead because no human life becomes completely free from challenge. But your soul is no longer meant to remain in endless battle mode. The chapter ahead carries a different energy. Calmer mornings, healthier boundaries, gentler love, quiet confidence, deep rest, and one day, you will look back at the exhausted version of yourself who believed they had to carry the world alone. And you will realize heaven was guiding you toward surrender not to weaken you, but to finally return you to peace. The war inside you is ending. You are allowed to rest now.